There comes a moment in every man's life when he looks around and realizes he's standing alone. The phone stops ringing. The invitations dry up. The people who once filled his world have quietly faded into the background. And in that silence, in that emptiness, he begins to wonder if something is fundamentally wrong with him. But what if I told you that this isolation isn't abandonment? What if I told you that this stripping away isn't punishment, but preparation? What if the very season that feels like rejection is actually God's way of positioning you for something extraordinary? When God has a plan for a man's life, He doesn't just give him a vision. He gives him a wilderness. He doesn't just hand him a crown. He leads him through a cave. Because the men God uses most powerfully are the ones who have learned to find their strength not in the applause of crowds, but in the presence of the Almighty. They are the ones who have discovered that when you have no one but God, you actually have everything you need. Tonight, I want to walk with you through the sacred process of how God prepares men who have no one but Him. If you've ever felt forgotten, overlooked, or left behind, this message is for you. Because what looks like isolation to the world might just be incubation from heaven. God begins His preparation by creating sacred space. When the Father wants to shape a man for His purposes, He first removes the distractions. He clears the room. He quiets the noise. Because transformation doesn't happen in the midst of chaos. It happens in the stillness where pretense falls away and truth rises to the surface. This isn't cruelty. This is craftsmanship. A master sculptor doesn't work on marble while it's surrounded by other stones. He isolates his chosen piece, studies it, and begins to chip away everything that doesn't belong. Every strike of the chisel feels destructive, but it's actually creative. God is removing what was never meant to remain, so He can reveal what was always meant to emerge. The isolation serves a purpose that extends far beyond your comfort. It strips away the masks you've worn for so long that you forgot they weren't your real face. When there's no audience to perform for, no expectations to meet, no image to maintain, you finally encounter the raw truth of who you are. And that encounter, though painful, is essential. Because God can't build on a false foundation, He must first excavate down to bedrock. In this season of solitude, God begins to rewire your source of validation. For years, maybe decades, you've drawn your sense of worth from external voices, the approval of friends, the recognition of colleagues, the admiration of those around you. But those sources are unreliable. They shift like sand beneath your feet. What builds you up one day can tear you down the next. So God lovingly but firmly disconnects you from those unstable power sources. He teaches you to plug into something that never fluctuates, never fails, never fades. His opinion of you doesn't change with your performance. His love for you isn't conditional on your success. His calling on your life isn't dependent on anyone else's endorsement. This rewiring process feels uncomfortable because you're learning to live without the constant feedback loop you've grown accustomed to. The silence feels foreign. The absence of external validation creates an echo that seems to magnify every doubt, every fear, every insecurity. But in that echo, if you listen carefully, you'll begin to hear something else. You'll hear the steady heartbeat of heaven. You'll hear the unwavering voice that has been calling your name since before you took your first breath. The wilderness becomes your classroom, and loneliness becomes your teacher. Here, stripped of all pretense, you learn lessons that can't be taught in comfortable surroundings. You discover strength you didn't know you possessed. You uncover faith that runs deeper than your circumstances. You develop a relationship with God that isn't based on what He can do for you, but on who He is to you. This is where God begins to download His heart into yours. When the static of human opinion is removed, when the interference of worldly ambition is silenced, you can finally hear clearly. The vision becomes crisp. The calling becomes undeniable. The purpose becomes unmistakable, isticable. And in this divine classroom, God begins to teach you the language of dependency, not the toxic dependency that drains and depletes, but the sacred dependency that empowers and elevates. You learn to lean not on your own understanding, but on His wisdom. You discover that surrender isn't weakness, but the highest form of strength. When you finally stop trying to figure it all out, when you cease striving to control every outcome, you create space for miracles to unfold. The Father uses this season to build your discernment like muscle. Without the constant chatter of human voices, you become sensitive to His whispers. You learn to distinguish between your thoughts and His thoughts, between your desires and His desires, between your timing and His timing. This spiritual sensitivity becomes one of your greatest assets because it keeps you aligned with heaven's agenda rather than earth's expectations. During these quiet months or years, God also begins to heal the wounds that crowds couldn't cure. The rejection you experienced in childhood, the betrayal that shattered your trust, the disappointments that left you questioning your worth. These deep places that you learned to hide, to medicate, to ignore, are finally given permission to surface. And though it hurts to feel them again, this time you're not alone with your pain. This time you have a healer who specializes in broken hearts and wounded spirits. The isolation becomes a cocoon where transformation takes place on the cellular level. Old patterns of thinking are dismantled. Limiting beliefs are uprooted. Fears that once paralyzed you lose their power. You emerge from this season not just older, but fundamentally different. You carry yourself with a quiet confidence that can't be shaken because it's not built on shifting circumstances, but on unshakable truth. God also uses this time to develop your capacity for the weight of what's coming. Destiny has mass, purpose has pressure. The calling He's preparing you for will require strength that can only be built in solitude. When you learn to carry the presence of God without buckling under its weight, you're ready to carry the responsibility He wants to entrust to you. The wilderness teaches you to feast on faith when there's no physical bread. You discover that man doesn't live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. This isn't just theology. It becomes your lived experience. You learn to find nourishment in His promises, satisfaction in His presence, and strength in His love. Your prayer life transforms from a religious exercise into a lifeline. When human help is scarce, you learn to cry out to the one who never sleeps, never leaves, never fails. Your conversations with heaven become more honest, more desperate, more real. You stop praying pretty prayers and start pouring out your heart. And in that raw authenticity, you encounter a God who meets you exactly where you are. This season also develops your ability to hear His voice above all other voices. When the noise dies down, when the opinions fade away, when the distractions are removed, His voice becomes unmistakable. You learn to recognize His tone, His timing, His tender way of correcting and directing. This intimate knowledge of His voice will serve you well when you step back into the world, because you'll know which voices to follow and which ones to ignore. The preparation isn't just about what God adds to your life during this season. It's also about what He removes. Pride gets stripped away layer by layer. Self-reliance gets exposed as the illusion it always was. The need to prove yourself to others gradually dissolves as you realize the only approval that matters is already yours. God is preparing you not just for success, but for significance. Not just for achievement, but for assignment. The man who emerges from this divine preparation carries something the world desperately needs. Brother, if you're walking through this season right now, if you're feeling the ache of isolation and wondering when it will end, let me speak directly to your heart. You are not forgotten. You are not abandoned. You are not being punished. You are being prepared. Every day of solitude is shaping you. Every night of silence is strengthening you. Every moment of feeling alone is actually drawing you closer to the one who will never leave you. The wilderness will not last forever, but the man who emerges from it will carry its lessons for a lifetime. When God finally calls you out of this season, when doors begin to open and connections are restored, you will step into your destiny with unshakable faith, unwavering purpose, and an intimate knowledge of the one who prepared you in secret. Your isolation is not your destination. It is your preparation. Your solitude is not your sentence. It is your sanctuary. And the God who has been with you through every lonely night, every silent prayer, every tear shed in the darkness, is the same God who will be with you when you step into the light of your calling. So hold on, keep trusting, keep keep believing, because the man God is shaping in the wilderness is the man the world is waiting for. And when your season of preparation is complete, your season of purpose will be undeniable. If this message stirred something in your spirit, I want you to share it with another man who might be walking through his wilderness season. Sometimes we need to be reminded that we're not alone in feeling alone. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let's continue this journey together. God bless you, brother. Your time is coming.